Welcome to the Life-Giving Leader Podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Life-Giving Leader Podcast. My name's Tyler Reagan. I'm your host. Excited to be with you here on this Memorial Day week. I hope you enjoyed the kickoff to summer. What a weird kickoff to summer, but as you've noticed, if you watch social media at all, some people haven't changed anything, and that's an interesting take in this season of a pandemic. But nonetheless, I guess each person is responsible for themselves, but also I read a post by Natalie Grant the other day that talks about how, as believers, we don't just have the right to, it's not just about rights, it's about being a servant, and it's about taking care of the least of these, and I think that's really important to remember. It was a great thought. Hey, before we get too far, I want to let you know and remind you that my friends at Retro 8 Films help bring this podcast to you. Ryan Shove and the entire team make some of the most incredible movies and films and videos for your brand, and I'm telling you, they've worked with Delta, Catalyst, Chick-fil-A, you name it, some huge organizations, and they've done that in a way that honors the client while creating incredibly endearing films for your brand. So if you want to know more about that, go to retro8films.com. They can connect with you, hear your story, and hear what you want to do with your brand. So I'm excited about this episode. John Mark Comer I met about 4 years ago. I think he's one of the greatest thought leaders we have right now on theology, and just he just wrote a book, released a book called Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And if you've ever been with John Mark, at an event or at his church at Bridgetown in Portland, you will see that he doesn't hurry a whole lot. It's his personality. He fights to be in the moment. And I think that's one of the things I admire so much about him. So we're going to get to that interview in just a second. A couple of things, I was thinking about what can we talk about today. I'm going to give you a quick update. I think it's good to say these things out loud, but my golf game is getting better, guys. And if you're curious about that, so I take the boys out. My boys are 9 and 12. And today we actually played, and I teach them how to play a skins game. Now, they both get handicaps. My current handicap, for those of you who are listening, though, anything about golf is pretty good. It's a 4.1, which I'm really proud of. I've hovered around that 6-7 spot, but because I'm getting to play a decent amount with the kids, we're slowly sneaking down. I have a feeling I shot a 77 today, so that might even drop that down into the threes. But so I'll keep you updated on how the handicap's coming along and how the golf game's coming. But we also just bought, me and my wife and the family, we bought a big old REI tent. They had their anniversary sale, and it's a 6-person tent. And what we decided to do was go ahead and put it up in the garage tonight and let the boys do a camp out, and they are jazzed. So that's a couple things going on in our world. Again, if you've been listening to the podcast, this is episode 6. Can't even believe we're getting halfway through this first release of episodes. I would love to hear from you. I'm really debating whether we kind of just do it in seasons or we just keep rolling every week. If we keep rolling every week, I'm going to need your support. I'm going to need you to help sharing. I'm deciding if maybe we go every other week, something like that, or just do seasons. And I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Again, you can email Cara, C-A-R-A, at lifegiving.co. Or you can just DM me on social media at Tyler Reagan. Let me know. But if you're liking it, if you're enjoying it, it seems to be some people are, which is really encouraging. Please share this podcast wherever you are listening, and then rate it on iTunes. Now, again, grateful for all of you. Next week, guys, girls, next week, Devon Franklin, the one and only Hollywood producer, incredible preacher, one of the best preachers I know, married to actress Megan Good. He is just a fireball of energy, and he loves Jesus. And I'm so grateful for his leadership. We had an awesome conversation about manhood, because he's written a couple books on that, about marriage, about creativity, and about leading teams. It was one of my favorite leadership conversations yet. So that's coming up next week. And last thing, I just want to let you know, as I do a lot of times, just tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking about in leadership. And I think about a lot of things, but one of the things I know is the church is in a really interesting spot. And as we record this, We have churches that have opened. We have churches that are not going to reopen for a long time, depending on what states they're in. And everybody's really debating this subject. And at the end of the day, I think it calls for us to pray. There's a call for us to have discernment. It's not just about getting the doors open. It's about doing it in a way that honors your community and honors the people around, but also they're giving people a chance, giving them opportunity to worship. And so, I don't know, I've just been thinking about what a really difficult, tricky spot this is. And I'm hearing a lot of leaders and pastors err on the side of caution, which is always a good thing. But then there's also some that are erring on the side of fear. And we just got to find some sort of balance there. But we got to be wise, and we got to take care of those around us, and take care of our staffs, and take care of the people who are going to be attending. And yes, you're right. There will be people that won't come back into the doors of your church for a year because they're going to wait it out. And I don't blame them, and that's okay. But there's going to be some people that are ready tomorrow when you open the doors. And let's just pray that we get it right in the sense of being smart and being safe. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. So moving into the next thing, and see, when I'm talking about thinking, I'm not sure there's somebody I appreciate more about being a thinker than John Mark Comer. John Mark is an absolute phenomenal thought leader, writer. The way he writes blows my mind. He's written 4 or 5 books. A couple of the books are My Name is Hope, Loveology, Garden City, God Has a Name, which is one of my favorite. And his newest book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And you've got to pick it up. It's fantastic. He's got a podcast, This Cultural Moment. It's out. And then he obviously is on a podcast for his church, Bridgetown Church, Bridgetown, up in Portland, Oregon. His wife, Tammy, and 3 kids. That's where they hang out. And they've been up there for a long time, and he loves coffee. So without further ado, one of my favorite people on the planet, John Mark Comer. Well, welcome back to the Life Giving Leader podcast. And today I have a friend of mine who is in the the left corner of the United States of America. John Mark Comer is on the podcast today.
Left both geographically and in the broad
so many levels.
Welcome to the Pacific Northwest.
John Mark, thanks for taking time, man. You've become a friend of mine who I just have such respect for. So grateful for the way you're continuing to invest in leaders in your church. And I love the way you think a little differently, not in a negative way, but you're pushing church, you're pushing community to be the very best thing. And a lot of that's probably come from your own story and your own experience and the ways that you're going, man, I didn't love that feeling. Can you, for those who might not be familiar, because we're so far apart, who knows?
For sure.
Can you give everybody just a little background of who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I live in the center of Portland, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest, and been here for a number of years. We church planted about 16 or 17 years ago, so been at it for a little while. Grew up in the church, son of a pastor. My dad came to faith in the Jesus movement, grew up in the Bay Area of California. My dad came to faith in the Jesus movement, went down at a Billy Graham crusade. Girlfriend invited him, the whole thing.
It's crazy.
And then he ended up on staff, a few years into following Jesus at one of the first kind of mega churches in California. I don't know if this stat is true or not, but I've read a few times that in the 1970s, there were only 10 churches in the continental U.S. over the size of 2,000 people. I don't know if that's true.
Wow.
The internet never lies, as we all know. But if that's true, I grew up at one of the 10. And so mega church was all I kind of ever knew. And I've had my ins and outs of, fan to critic to now a bit more ambivalent, there's pros and cons to everything. And
right.
I'm way less angsty and way more grateful than ever before. But that's kind of my story. Grew up in that and planted a church, and it grew very large, and then kind of hit a kind of burnout moment a number of years ago, and decided to really kind of reset some of my metrics. And so I've been on this journey the last 7 years, 8 years of kind of slowing down and spiritual formation and direction and learning more about the relationship between spirituality and psychology and emotional health and prayer, all that. That's kind of been my journey the last, and really the animating. I was listening to a Jim Collins interview recently. Yeah. And it was really good. It's a long form interview. And he said, every creative and knowledge worker has basically one kind of central life question, that all of their work revolves around this life question. And that was an interesting concept, and instantly like mine came to the surface of my mind. It's like, oh yeah, my driving question is, how do people change? Or specifically, like, how, if the end goal of the spiritual journey is, union with God, and as our Greek Orthodox brothers and sisters would say, theosis or deification, or as we in the West would say, Christ-likeness. If that's the end goal of the spiritual journey, how does that happen? And most people just carry a set of assumptions into that rather than critical thinking. So I think that's the question that kind of animates a lot of my life and work.
That's good. And so did you think a lot on these things before you hit that moment of burnout, or would you say that kind of
not at
season,
all.
that season for you catapulted you into this thought?
I just wanted to be like next gen, more Orthodox Rob Bell. That's all. I just wanted a large church that was cool and to be a good preacher. That was, and that sounds a little bit crass, crass than it was. I wanted to move with God. That, I'm sure I had more there. Yeah. But no, this was not at all. I very much grew up in the study the Bible and use willpower kind of method of spirit. Go to church, study the Bible, use willpower kind of view of spiritual formation. I would not have even used that language. Yeah. So it's new. It came to me through crisis, pain, failure, feeling like a failure as a husband and a father, feeling like an unhappy, anxious, person. It came to me through pain.
Yeah. And I think for most of us that tends to be the case. And, I would love for you just to talk for a second about kind of that season. And I don't you've talked publicly about it, so I know it's pretty common for you to talk about this, but the work I'm working on for the next book is around when you inherit influence, when you step into a space that you didn't start, and all the complexities of leading in that space.
That is going to be so helpful, Tyler, for so many
I hope
people.
So. That's the goal, just to, it's just a different leadership skill set. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you is, I think that seems to have been part of that whole season for you, is stepping into your dad's church that he had founded, right? Did he start it? And
yeah, well, kind of. We planted a church together, actually, which is a unique thing. And yeah.
And then you kind of stepped into the leadership role.
Yeah. And the short version is, we planted a church together. I wanted to go plant a church right in the urban core, but I was too young, basically. So we planted together, and the original plan was 2 years in, I'll get sent out as our first church plant. But 2 years in, the church had grown crazy fast. We started a college. This was back in the day of kind of college ministry in the church. This was 17 years ago. And so we started this college ministry, and it had grown just as large as the church. And so basically 2 years became 3, became 4, became 5. And then I was still wanting to go, but my dad is 30 years older than me. I was, nearing 30. He was nearing 60. And he said, listen, if you leave now, half the church will go. You'll have an unhealthy church plant, because it's not a great way to start a church with a couple thousand people or whatever, for health. And so I ended up staying, which in hindsight was very much the wrong decision. We both would agree now, but I ended up staying, and we kind of switched roles.
Yeah. What would you as you walk through that season, what would you say to a young leader or a leader who is about to step into an existing team, about to step in and potentially inherit something they didn't start? What's a piece of advice, maybe from something that didn't go well, or something that you learned going, gosh, if I did that again, here's 1 or 2 things that I would see coming, and I would try to address from the very beginning?
Yeah, well, almost all I have is mistakes and to share. So I don't have a lot of here's what I did right. I mostly have, here's what I did wrong.
Which honestly, John Mark, most people, that's the case, because we don't come in with a plan on some of these things. It's hard. And there's a lot of emotion connected to it when it's related to family.
Yeah. And for me, that complicated everything. The fact that it was my dad, and hopefully that's not as common of a thing, or maybe it is. And sometimes that's a great experience, and sometimes it's not a great experience.
And it is in a lot of churches, right?
It is in a lot of churches, yeah.
Or that scenario.
And there's special dynamics there that are very difficult to navigate. And it's no different than, a lot of businesses are family-owned businesses, and there's a whole psychology around father to son, or mother to daughter, or vice versa, or whatever, and the tensions that come out of that, and how the next generation's convictions are often perceived as criticism or critique of the previous generations, and so there's all sorts of tenderness there, But I think there's so many mistakes I made. The main mistake I made was I'm prone to idealistic thinking. And I think a lot of leaders are, in particular, if you're a visionary leader, if you're a thinker, if you're an N on the Myers-Briggs, if you're a strategic kind of person, if you're a creative, then that's all a boon, but it's also a potential lethal danger to your leadership, because you start, I call it like the whiteboard fallacy. Like you whiteboard your church, and what that doesn't it's illusionary thinking, it's magical thinking, it's fantasy thinking, it's not grounded in reality. The most dangerous leaders are the ones that are idealistic, disconnected, and not grounded in real life with real relationships. That's why when pastors become kind of super successful and then get disconnected from their churches, they become increasingly not only irrelevant but dangerous, because they're not grounded in reality and they're giving false messages to the world. Whether
there's even a passage
go.
Right in Psalm where it talks about zeal without knowledge.
It's so dangerous.
It's deadly, right? It's that same idea that I can have passion, I can have creative ideas all day long, but if you don't combine that with wisdom,
and especially if you're successful, then my therapist said to me a couple of days ago, he said, we're very similar personalities. He said, if people like us get everything we want, we become hopelessly narcissistic and we give false messages to the world.
So there's that.
So there's that. So I think I had to learn the hard way that I can think up on a whiteboard or in a strat session vision of church that is so compelling and intoxicating to my mind or imagination, but it's not grounded in the reality of who I am as a leader, who my leadership team is that I'm a part of, and the spiritual heritage of the community that I'm a part of. So a church is not a blank slate any more than a person is a blank slate or a child is a blank slate. They have a story, they have a personality, they have a history, they have a heritage. That doesn't mean they're not malleable. All human beings are malleable and changeable, but most of us change very slowly and at great cost. And so I think I came into this church, and I think that, often in large church culture, it drives the lead communicator up to kind of an apostolic role in the language of the New Testament. And so I had to learn the hard way. I'm not an apostle. I'm not a leader of leaders. I'm not an Andy Stanley. I'm not even an extrovert. I'm not a relational conflict guy. Like, let's just go in and hash it out and argue and then go out for a beer. I'm like melancholy. I'm sensitive. That's my limp. It's a great limp in my leadership, and also it's a large part of what brings tenderness and empathy to me when I would normally be a just kind of critical jerk type A kind of person without that melancholy side. It's where all my compassion and empathy and humility comes from, and so even prophetic spiritual sensitivity. But it has this big shadow side. If I'm just easily hurt feelings and I get melancholy, one hard conversation and I'll be wrecked for 4 days. That's not good character trait in a leader of a large organization. You need to be better if I was like a jock and just kind of, thick-skinned or whatever. So I had to learn the hard way. I'm not a blank slate. I am who I am. I come with potential. I also come with limitations. I have a gift that I give to the church, and I also have some massive shadow side and vulnerabilities and weaknesses that I have to shore up. And the church is the same. The church is not a blank slate. I think when I came into it, we had this large church, and I was just like, what if we took this church and we turned it into this missional blah, 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 blah. And it was dishonoring to my father. It was dishonoring to the story of the church. I wanted to take them somewhere that most of them did not want to go. And it was a disingenuous thing. And so I wish that I'd been less idealistic, more grounded in reality, more self-aware, and more grateful for what was, rather than attempting to create this utopia. And I'll end with this last thing. I don't know if you've read, I know Jordan Peterson is quite controversial, so I don't say this to promote him or disapprove, just pass along aside. I thought it was really interesting. I was listening to a lecture by him where he said that, what started his profession as a clinical psychologist long before he was famous was the problem of evil in the 20th century, in particular communism and the Holocaust. Like, how was such gross evil done by basically some of the most sophisticated intellectual societies in the history of civilization? And as part of that, in the 80s, when this was anathema, before it was like hipster Portland cool, he started buying up Soviet like propaganda art from, the Russian Revolution and Stalin and Lenin. And he has a whole room in his house full of Soviet art and propaganda. And he said, when people come over, it's like, it freaks them out. It's like the most terrifying thing. And obviously he's not pro-Marxist. He put it there, he said, to remind myself of the danger of idealistic thinking. And we forget, in particular, if you're a conservative and you're not pro-Marxist or, that kind of vision, we forget that this was utopian thinking. These were intellectuals who thought we're going to abolish class difference and poverty and injustice, and we're going to create the perfect society. And what they ended up creating was mass genocide and one of the greatest evils in human history. So I think that, obviously I'm not saying I'm a communist leader who has a dead pile of dead bodies. If they're dead bodies, they're metaphoric. But I think that danger is preeminent for idealism.
There's a line there. Yeah. So let's switch gears real quick. I want to ask you about your latest book, because I think it's so applicable for us as leadership right now in these unprecedented times. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. What a great title, first of all. I love your books.
Thanks.
I've read Garden City and I've read God Has a Name. And I love
so kind.
Creativity around them and the way that you present them. But this conversation, man, I would love just one or two practical tips for those of us, myself included, who struggle to say no sometimes.
Gosh, I'm with you.
Honestly don't, like, especially in a season right now, you feel like you got to say yes to any opportunity, anything.
Yes.
How would you encourage us from a practical perspective? And then I got a couple of lightning questions for you, but just around that subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think short version is just, to put it very simply, is just rule of life. So I'm a passionate advocate for the ancient idea of rule of life, which you can update into whatever language or framework you want, fixed hour schedule or block schedule or whatever. But a rule of life, I think it's more important than ever. It's how we live inside of our limitations and also how we live in alignment with our deepest desires. And how, the great temptation for leaders in general, and I think in a season like this, in a crisis especially, is that we become reactive rather than responsive. And we're just like, oh, here's a thing. Oh, here's a meeting. Oh, here's that. Okay, I got to take the call. Oh, I got to call this person back. Yep. And we just end up reacting our way through this crisis, which is probably the worst thing. Like now demands more thoughtfulness and intelligence and wisdom and creativity than ever before. We can't react our way through this next season. We have to respond, but we have to actually live with some intentionality through it. So I think rule of life in general is just key right now. Digital rule of life is key right now. I think all of that kind of stuff, crafting boundaries,
really good.
You know what I mean, to live. And so again, that's just so simple. And then what was this? Yes, the second question. What was the second question?
No, I've got some lightning questions for you that you got to answer real quick. But I just think I just want to just reiterate for you and for the listeners, like, this is so critical, man. Like, you got to have a foundation you build this stuff off of. And if we're just reacting to everything, we lose.
And it's going to be, and the other, here's the other thing I was going to say is, what's tricky right now is, I remember, I think it was John Ortberg once who said to me, manage energy, not time. And so we all recognize there are seasons to life and leadership. And there are, just like in our church, we have a thing in August, we call it fallow season, where we give everybody, because it's Pacific Northwest climate, you want to be outside in the summer, winters are miserable. So we give everybody a 3-day weekend in August. You're not allowed to do any extra events. It's basically like answer your email, bare minimum for August, and then take long weekends, go to the beach, go camping, relax, take all your vacation, because we know that when fall hits, from about the middle of September through New Year's is just like at our church, no matter what we try to do, it's just full on, so we're still Sabbathing and living with emotional health, but we're just working our butts off. Yep. And then we know after New Year's, we have another 2 weeks fallow break where we give everybody kind of unofficial vacation, and there's a breath and a breather. So we have those rhythms. And so all that to say, there are seasons. Like, I've worked harder in the last 6 weeks than I have in a long time. Or actually the first month, from when it hit through Easter, I just said, you know what? I just basically, all I did was wake up in the morning, pray, and then work, and then Sabbath, and then do it again.
Yep.
And my family has a mode. They're really supportive. So we almost do it together as a family. Like, great, Dad's got to go do this thing. We're doing these other things. We're there for the church. But you can't do that indefinitely. And that's the challenge, is we have no idea how long this will last. This could be a couple more weeks. It could be a couple more months. It could be a couple of years, at some level. We don't know. And so it's really hard to manage energy right now. So we made an intentional decision. Great, we're going to give it a long month, And then we're going back to our regular rhythm, and I'm not doing 1,000 things. And so I think there's a seasonality to it, which is hard to gauge right now, but I think you have to give yourself permission to sometimes work your tail off and then sometimes just pull back and rest.
That's good. Well, for time's sake, I got 2 questions. I usually got a couple, but I'm going to ask you these. Favorite movie of all time?
Oh man, Empire Strikes Back.
Come on. I love it. That's one of my favorites of that too. All right, last one. This might be hard for you for a Pacific Northwest guy. If you were on an island, you only had one band's catalog of music that you can listen to for the rest of however long you're on that island. You can listen to all of it. What band would you pick?
Oh man, I'm not a favorite band guy because I don't know. I played in bands for years, so I'm like always listening to new music. So it's like it changes month to month. Right now, I would say Favela. There's an artist that is my favorite artist right now called Favela that I found, and it was just this gorgeous record. And then I started paying attention to it was on a mainstream thing. I started paying attention to the lyrics, and they were like poetic, but they sounded like theological and beautiful. And then I was speaking at this event in the UK, and I found out that he was there. And he's like a really strong, humble, amazing Jesus dude.
That's awesome.
He has 3 records out, and they are
I got to look that up.
In the world right now.
Well, I just want to say, I know earlier you mentioned, you weren't this kind of leader, but you were more of this kind of leader. And I think what we always talk about is that life-giving leaders lead from their truest self. And the way that you've discovered your truest self has brought life to so many of us, me included, but I know it does to your church. And so I love your uniqueness. I love that you lean into it. I love that you bring life through that uniqueness. And so I just want to say thank you as a friend, but also as someone who knows friends who've been impacted by the words you share and sharing the truth of what's going on. And so thanks for taking the time to be on this, and just thanks for being a great leader.
Oh, that's incredibly kind. And I'll just say thank you and peace and love to you.
Who doesn't love that guy? Are you kidding me? John Mark Comer, thank you for being a part of the Life Giving Leader podcast. If you want to find out more about John Mark, you can go to johnmarkcomer, COMER.com. On Instagram, he's John Mark Comer. Pretty easy to find. Again, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry and God Has a Name. All his books are in anywhere you can get books, anywhere books are sold. And then check out his podcast, This Cultural Moment, and also the Bridgetown Church podcast. So just grateful for his thoughts when it comes to being a follower of Jesus, taking care of the people around you, and also just this idea of ruthlessly eliminating hurry. Now, I am a person that likes to hurry. As a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier, I played golf, and I am always getting on my kids because we're trying to hurry. And sometimes it's okay just to stop and slow down and get into the habit and the posture of taking your time. And I got to be honest, I'm not real good at that. And I bet other people that are listening aren't real good at that. So maybe our challenge over these next 7 days, for those of us who struggle with that, is to figure out a better pace, try to find a new rhythm, and try to take it down a notch. And I think this book would be a great resource for you. Again, you can follow John Mark and hear a lot more about the content and the things he's up to. Again, next week, Devon Franklin. Make sure you join us there. It's been an awesome episode. Happy Memorial Day week. Happy kickoff to summer, and we will see you next week.